Even through hard times and unexpected events, relationships last forever. This is Relationships Last Forever, created by Kaylee Hazlett,
Mika Gillespie,
Orion Purdue,
Maria Henley, Damien St. Vincent, and Kristen Hall.
New Tech 2018, and here's the story.
Jim and William have been best friends their entire lives. They both started moonshining when they were 16. Money was hard to come by, and they needed to help out their families. William was the smartest when it came to staying in the clear. That was obvious, but Jim has had a lot of close calls. William woke up early. Even the birds were still asleep when he left. Jim, on the other hand, didn't bother to get up until later when the birds were wide awake and chirping. When Jim arrives at the still, he immediately says to William,
"Let's focus on getting this done and got us a buyer."
A couple of days later, Jim, go ahead and drop off the first part of this order. I'll finish the rest case. Take a rest in a while. When Jim arrives at the buy store, he sees that he has to go over a steep, muddy hill. He worries that his truck won't go over, but he flips face into an old, rusty truck. He heads up the hill and is less than halfway up when his tires begin to spin. He shifts gear and tries again, giving a glance to the shine on the back. The tires only keep spinning, and he is forced to park the truck at the bottom and walk up the hill. When Jim starts walking up the hill, as soon as he gets close enough to see the outline of the buyer's truck in the dark, he notices another car with all the lights off, parked right next to it. He stops walking and turns around, trying to avoid being seen, when suddenly he hears a gruff shout.
"Stop right there!"
Jim takes off running, full speed into the woods. He is jumping over moss-covered logs and is trying to avoid trees. His feet are sprinting over the brown dried leaves, making a crunch sound with every step. With the officer on Jim's tail, Jim is trying to run even faster than before. Jim looks back over his shoulder, but it's too dark to see the officer behind him. Just as he turns to look forward, he smacks right into a tree and knocks himself out.
I'm confused when I wake up. I'm lying on a hard bed in a dark room. It takes a few minutes for my eyes to adjust and my brain to register the surroundings. I set up an officer seat on the other side of the cell bars. He bangs against the cell and yells,
"Rise and shine, Slick. You're wanted in front of the judge. She's been awaiting on you."
The officer opens my cell and yanks me to my feet. He dragged me down to the narrow hallway toward the courtroom. I'm familiar with the courthouse. I know the drill. I've already had 3 warnings. With my head so foggy, I found myself standing in front of a judge. Across the room, I see William. We make eye contact. I know William is scared, and I understand why. I won't be getting any warning today. The judge glances at me, and I light up with recognition.
Jim, what are you doing here again?
I say, "Miss Jones, I'm in some trouble." She smiles and replies,
Yes, my cousin, you are.
The ballot reads off the evidence and statements from the officer. It's enough for a charge. Miss Jones has been debating her decision. It's hard to choose what to do with someone you grew up with.
Now, Jim, I know that this is your 4th time being in this room for the same reason, so I'm giving you the choice of 2 years in federal prison.
Jim manages to look at William and give him an hopeful look.
Jim, you have a choice of facing the charges and taking the chance with the jury, or agree to enlist and head out to boot camp.
Jim takes a second to process this while everyone eagerly awaits for his answer.
I think I'll enlist in the Army."
The officers start working over to get him, but Jim turns around and saw that William was walking towards him. Jim ran over to him, ignoring the officer shouting. Jim gave his best friend one last hug. He wouldn't see him for a year. Jim and William write to each other weekly. The night that Jim was arrested, William reveals in one of his letters that he was caught too. William had finished canning and was on his way. Cops had saw him, and William went on many different roads, and when he couldn't see the cop anymore, he drove into a cornfield, turned his lights off, and laid in between the stalks of corn. And when he found out what happened to Jim, he went to the jail and asked if they could talk. The officer declined and made him leave. Jim wakes up with screaming. He jumps to his feet and runs out to the tent to see what's going on. People are laughing, clapping, and dancing and playing around. Looks like somebody's birthday. Everything is fine. There are several of Jim's new friends standing beside different women. They are all standing in a circle, and Jim walks over to look at what's going on. When he can see it clearly enough, his heart drops. There's a woman dancing in the middle with her friends. Jim prays he'll see her again. 6 months in.
William, I really don't like this girl.
Jim writes in his letter, and he walks to put it in the mail. When he's walking, he runs into his pal, Maggie. You're taking Pam out tonight. Does she know why you're in the Army? Maggie says.
"Yeah, we talked about it last week. She's okay with it and understands."
Jim replies. 9 months in. What?
"Will you come back home and marry me?"
Jim asks Pam, her face lights up, and she hugs the breath out of him. Yes, yes, yes! Pam yells, her face red as a tomato.